August 1799. The Republic of France faced the imminent threat of invasion by a renewed formidable coalition of Russian and Austrian forces. After Napoleon heard the news, he and his closest generals left Egypt, a move widely seen as an act of betrayal. Napoleon left his army in the command of General Jean-Baptiste Kléber, a disciplined and capable leader, and promised to send reinforcements. However, due to the Royal Navy's effective blockade, these promised reinforcements never arrived, leaving the French isolated. French soldiers were outraged when they learned of Bonaparte's departure, but they placed their confidence in Kléber's leadership. Out of 22,000 troops, 6,000 could no longer fight due to illness and injury. Yet the French retained control of key Egyptian cities, but their army was in a desperate state, facing a British and an Ottoman coalition of forces. That November, some French troops successfully managed to repel an Ottoman landing force in the village of Damietta. But in December, they lost El Arish in the Sinai. Negotiations commenced with the Ottomans, and the Convention of El Arish was signed on January 24, 1800. As a result, the French army evacuated Upper Egypt and some cities in Lower Egypt, and a few units and their officers, including General Kléber, left Alexandria and returned to France. However, in March 1800, British Admiral Sir Sidney Smith informed Kléber that government orders from Britain prevented him from recognizing the Convention of El Arish. Angered by this, Kléber resumed hostilities, and the British and the Ottomans believed the French were now weak to continue fighting. Yusuf Pasha commanded Nassif Pasha to march on Cairo, prompting the local population to revolt. On the eve of the battle, Kléber, for his part, had little more than 10,000 men at his disposal, and during the night led them across the Nile and set them up on the river's right bank, while Nassif Pasha occupied the village of El Matareya with his vanguard of 6,000 elite janissaries reinforced with cannon and cavalry. Grand Vizier Yusuf positioned himself further north, between the villages of Abu Za'abal and El Kanach, with the rest of his almost 60,000 men. French troops now formed square formation, while the Ottomans were in a defensive position in the village of El Matarish. Around 3 a.m., Friant's division sprang into action. They wanted to bypass the Ottoman position to the east and positioned itself to cut off the enemy's retreat. The French left wing was led by Régnier, and which then moved to attack the village of El Matarish head-on. After a small volley, the French charged with bayonets fixed at the Ottoman troops. After a short battle, the French managed to take the village, and they forced their enemy to flee. However, with their retreat cut off, the Janissaries were forced to seek refuge in Cairo, and a corps of Mamelukes rushed west, sailing past the French army to reach the city. Which they proceeded to capture with ease. Having gained these advantages over the Ottoman vanguard, the French squares, meanwhile, reorganized and set off toward the village of Sariakos and Al-Marj, west of Birkat al-Hajj. On the way, they suddenly saw the bulk of the Ottoman forces, which were now charging at Friant's division at full speed. At the last moment, French formed square just in time to repel the enemy's assault. But the Ottomans now encircled Kléber's army, and the first wave of Mamluk cavalry surged forward. But the enemy was met with a determined response of steel and shot, volley after volley, cutting them down in droves and forcing them to turn and flee. Still, the enemy held their ground and launched a second wave, larger and more determined than before. But just like the Battle of the Pyramids, the squares held firm against Turkish cavalry. The combined fire from the French infantry and artillery soon tore through the attackers and forced them to scatter. And now Ottoman troops were retreating in all directions. The French opted to pursue them northwards. Kléber and his troops stormed the Ottoman camp, slaughtering everyone left behind. Their victory was complete, and the Ottoman army suffered a heavy loss. Almost 1 in 4 of their men were killed or wounded. The French, meanwhile, lost only 600. The Ottomans retreated toward Gaza, but about 6,000 men had reached Cairo. It took Kléber a month to retake the city in bloody street battles that caused many civilian casualties. The situation calmed, and Kléber was then confident that he could hold Egypt. But on the 14th of June, 1800, a Syrian student approached Kléber disguised as a beggar and fatally stabbed him. Kléber was replaced by General Manu. Manu was much less appreciated by his troops than Kléber, and his military skills were hardly notable. The British now sent troops to Egypt under the command of General Sir Ralph Abercrombie. Unfortunately, bad weather delayed the landing of his expeditionary force at Abukir Bay. This gave the French time to respond, Around 2,000 troops lined the sand dunes overlooking the bay. The French inflicted heavy losses on the British vanguard as they landed, but under Major General Sir John Moore, the British rallied, seized a beachhead with a bayonet charge. The surface of the strip of land was largely sand, which made marching exhausting. But the British advanced along the narrow strip between the sea and Lake Aboukir. At Mandora, they pushed the French back. As night fell, the British withdrew to a defensive position 5 miles from Alexandria, near the ruins of Nicopolis. There, they fortified their position to await a possible French counterattack. Moore and his reserve held the Roman camp ridge by the sea. The Guards and Coote's brigades occupied the central ridge, fieldworks and guns, while Craddock's brigade was positioned between the central ridge and Lake Mariotis, and Royal Navy gunboats covered the British right flank from the sea. When Menou crossed by a dried-out section of Lake Mariotis and reached Alexandria with reinforcements of infantry, cavalry, and guns. Menou was determined to take the initiative and attacked Abercrombie's army on the Roman camp ridge. At 3:30 a.m., the French launched their attack, drove back the British outposts. Lenousse's division pressed the British right, and Valentin's brigade advanced in column along the seashore, and Seely's mounted a direct assault upon the redoubt. But the attack failed, and Valentin's brigade split. One battalion climbed the hillside, and the other moved towards the redoubt's northwest and the nearby gap. The right battalion was met with grape shot and fell back. Lenousset was mortally wounded trying to rally them. While Rampon's division advanced on Lenousset's right, advancing through the low ground to the rear of the Roman camp. And Moore ordered the 42nd Wing and men from the 28th to wheel and push Rampon's battalion into a building, where they inflicted heavy losses. With every French soldier becoming casualty or prisoner. Moore reformed the 42nd and attacked the redoubt's left flank and pushed back Seely's Rio battalion. Meanwhile, Menou's cavalry charged. The two British regiments there were forced to reposition. The French cavalry got itself stuck in British dugouts, and the 42nd took the opportunity to counterattack and drove the French back with heavy losses. At daylight, Seely's leading battalion attacked the redoubt's northern face, and they faced heavy fire from the 58th Regiment ahead, and the Royal Navy gunboat off the coast. And the French attack collapsed. Rampon's division attacked the British Guards Brigade, but was driven back by steady volleys. Seeking a new advantage, he shifted his troops around the Guards' left flank. Several companies of the 3rd Guards were pulled back to confront this threat. They suffered severe losses until the Royal Scots of Coote's brigade advanced in support of Rampon. Rampon then withdrew from the position. In a final effort, Menou ordered General Royce to lead a second-line cavalry attack. 500 troopers in all charged up the southern ridge of the Roman camp, while part of the line struck the central ridge. They were supported by an advance of Renier's division. The French cavalry breached the 42nd Highlanders on the southern edge of the Great Redoubt, while Moore managed to gallop clear of the French attack. Abercrombie was captured. However, he was immediately rescued by Scottish troops. Scattered into small groups, the Highlanders fought fiercely while another unit fired on the French cavalry from behind the Great Redoubt. Meanwhile, fresh troops crushed the left of Royce's brigade. The French tried again to attack the ridge, but were repelled. Their guns fired at full elevation, hitting the British second line. While Abercrombie rode to a fortification at the northern end of the central ridge, he was hit in the leg. He died of his wounds 7 days later. After restocking ammunition, British guns resumed firing. And 2 French ammunition wagons were hit by British shells, causing a massive explosion that shook the battlefield. Menou, previously declining to withdraw, countermanded this, and knew he had to pull his troops back. And the French withdrew to their positions on the heights of Nicopolis in reasonably good order. The Battle of Alexandria saw intense fighting between nearly equal forces, though the French held a slight advantage. Some British units, like those defending the Great Redoubt, and the 28th Regiment suffered relatively light losses. However, the French cavalry charge caused heavy casualties, especially to the Black Watch and Stuart's Minorca Regiment. The 3rd Guards also faced severe losses, with nearly 200 killed or wounded. Overall British casualties numbered over 1,500 wounded and more than 200 killed or missing, and the French lost key officers Lenusset and Seely. Shortly after the battle, General Abercrombie died of gangrene. After the battle, General Hutchinson succeeded Abercrombie as British commander. He left General Major Coote at the head of the 6,000-strong force to keep Menou bottled up in Alexandria, and marched on Cairo. Backed by Ottoman forces, he besieged the city, forcing 13,000 French troops to surrender on the 27th of June. The French situation in Alexandria was becoming increasingly desperate. Unable to break out, with their food and ammunition running low, French troops were exhausted and wanted to go home, and disease spread through the camp, making the situation even worse. On the 31st of August, 1801, Menou eventually surrendered his 10,000 troops. Thousands of lives were lost on both sides, many in battle, but even more to disease. French soldiers suffered from bubonic plague, a hostile climate, and a hostile population, all because of the ambition of one man. In the months following the capitulations in Cairo and Alexandria, approximately 23,000 people were repatriated to France on British ships. British wins at Alexandria and at Copenhagen confirmed their naval and overseas dominance over France. Yet Britain found itself isolated, its continental allies defeated, with Russia now threatening war. With no chance to build a new coalition to stop France's advance, they settled in to negotiate. After months of negotiations, peace was finally achieved after 10 years of war, in the Treaty of Amiens. But after just 2 years, Napoleon named himself Emperor of the French, a move that would plunge Europe into another 10 years of unending conflict and turmoil.